All right. Well, I'm going to call the City of Iowa City Work Session to order for October 7, 2025. And I want to welcome our county supervisors that are here as well. Happy that you all have joined us. Our item number one is a joint meeting with the Johnson County Supervisors about permanent supportive housing. I think I'm going to jump in maybe straight to the shelter house and ask them to come up and do a presentation. So we'll welcome Chrissy Canganelli.
Good afternoon. Let me see if I can pull this up. Not sure how to change the presentation view. Maybe not run it, but not show all the notes. Yeah. Thank you. Thanks, Tracy. Thank you, everyone, for this opportunity to present to you and to have this conversation about permanent supportive housing and the work that we've been doing to build capacity for this housing intervention. This afternoon, we're joined by our colleagues from the Corporation for Supportive Housing. They will be doing a fair amount, the heavy lifting of this presentation. Amy Stetzel with CSH is here in the room, and then Gabe Schuster is joining virtually. So with that, I'm just going to turn this over to Amy. Thank you.
Great. Welcome, Amy.
Hi, thank you. Hi, everybody. My name is Amy Stetzel. I'm the Upper Midwest Director for the Corporation for Supportive Housing. And Upper Midwest means I get to work with folks in North and South Dakota, Iowa, Wisconsin, and Minnesota on a whole host of things related to increasing housing stability for the residents of those states. So we'll talk a little bit more about what CSH is, what we do in the upcoming slides, but just wanted to give you kind of a little bit of a lens of what my role is. So today we're going to be talking about what is supportive housing, how does it operate, what is the need for permanent supportive housing here in Iowa City, what the data shows us, and what more do we need and what do we need to protect. And then we're going to be talking about some next steps in some community planning processes over the next handful of months. So CSH, we're a national nonprofit. We're headquartered in New York, but we've got regional offices across the nation. And we've been here in the Midwest, gosh, for 25 plus years. So we have a really strong presence here, but really we work to advance affordable housing aligned with services. At the core of it all, permanent supportive housing is deeply affordable housing connected to deep end services for folks. And really historically, permanent supportive housing came out of meeting the needs of folks who are chronically homeless, so have really complex health and behavioral health issues, and has over the years, we also work with folks who have IDD or are child welfare involved, but at the crux of it all, still have those complex health needs. So CSH, we do a lot of different kinds of things. We do TA and training, we do policy work, we do systems change. We're also a CDFI, so we're a nonprofit bank, so we also do loans and things like that for communities. And of course, our focus is in the name. We're focused on housing, but we're also focused on economic security is a key piece of that, and then the services, which are really the secret sauce to permanent supportive housing. So really quickly, here in Iowa, we were able, gosh, a handful of years ago now, Chrissy, to collaborate on a FUSE initiative that led to Cross Park Place. This was before I was at CSH. We worked with folks across the state of Iowa to create definitions and standards for permanent supportive housing. We'll talk about those in a second. We've been working with partners on the ground to push back against the criminalization bills that have been coming forward. And we also just finished a supportive housing academy or institute, which was a 5-month-long training series with 7 teams across the state of Iowa, all about let's take your dream of what you want housing to look like in your community and turn it into a reality. So I just want to give a shout out here to my colleagues here in Iowa City that are part of the Iowa Center for Excellence in Behavioral Health. They led a year and a half long piece of work that was around how do we define permanent supportive housing here in Iowa? How do we measure quality? And Chrissy and I were part of that work group. I know Shelter House was seen as somebody who was seen as a best practice in permanent supportive housing, knowledge expert at that table. They were called to be a part of that. And we came up with this definition of permanent supportive housing. And so I am just going to, I usually don't read slides. I hate it when people do that, but I am going to do that here because I think it is really important. So PSH, permanent supportive housing, is an evidence-based, minimal barrier housing intervention prioritized for individuals with those complex, multi-occurring conditions that meet fidelity to the established standards that this group also set. Individuals in PSH live with affordability, autonomy, and dignity through the combination of person-centered, flexible, voluntary support services and have a legal right to remain in their housing as defined by the terms of a standard renewable lease. Access to and maintenance of housing is available to individuals who meet this eligibility criteria and is not based on housing readiness requirements such as sobriety, behavioral, or program compliance. So quickly, what you heard what supportive housing is. So what permanent supportive housing is not is a treatment model or method. It's not time limited, and it's not a group home or some other kind of licensed care facility. And actually, well, they'll come up later, but I want to say too quickly, the Center for Excellence in Behavioral Health also did this incredible amount of work setting up standards that folks in Iowa who run permanent supportive housing can go and measure their programs against. Unfortunately, their contract with HHS didn't get renewed for that, but all of that information is still on the website. So still accessible, trainings are still there to review, but want to give them a lot of kudos because they did a ton of work and are excellent at what they do. So there's two different ways we can do permanent supportive housing. You can do it as a single site. That's one big building, right? Where you've got maybe 20, 30, 40 tenants or rooms in a building. You also can do scattered sites. So what we see often in communities is organizations will buy single-family homes, and then you can rent those to folks and have the services come to them and wrap around them in the home. So for development purposes, that can be new development. You can brand new construction, right? Or you can acquire a property and rehab it. Or we often hear about something called master leasing, and we have a handful of organizations that do that. Sometimes they are doing that in partnership with landlords where they say, we will take over the lease. This is still your building, you still own it, but we'll take over the lease and kind of run all of the legwork with the people who live here, make sure everything is up to snuff, and do all the lease pieces of it, but you still own it. Otherwise, we also see organizations who actually buy the housing and then they become the leasing agent. So what is permanent supportive housing? So this stool, it's so hokey, but we use it all the time. We talk about this four-legged stool. And those four legs, the key ones really are housing, property management, and housing management or asset management and support services. But then the fourth leg that I think is just as critical is the project's relationship to a community. How does it work in a community? How is it integrated? And so again, you can see the model here, but permanent supportive housing is that deeply affordable housing with all these services around it, whether that's employment services, it could be primary health services, it could be mental health, substance use, parenting, life skills, and then basic good case management comes with that as well. The relationship piece is really key in supportive housing. These are those quality standards that our friends at the Iowa Center of Excellence for Behavioral Health put together. I'm not going to read through all these, but what I will read through is the 5 yellow circles, which are the core pillars. So again, minimal barrier, you heard this in the definition, minimal barrier, voluntary, affordable, integrated, and folks have informed choice. So what we find across the nation, across many studies, across longitudinal studies, is that supportive housing works when it's done according to the model. Tenants stay housed. Tenants have social and community connections. Tenants increase their income and employment. All these positive outcomes we see that we want for people in our communities, we see with supportive housing. And we also see that it ends chronic homelessness. It ends homelessness. It's been proven to do so over and over again. So what I stole this, I will say, this slide, it's got a lot in it, but what I love about it, I stole it from my friends at Minnesota Housing Partnership. And I made it Iowa specific. Because what I love about this is it shows where permanent supportive housing falls in a housing continuum. All of you are constantly thinking about the full housing continuum in Iowa City and Johnson County. And how do you have every piece of what you need to make that housing continuum hum and work for the people in your community? And so what I like about where this shows is sometimes, I know I do this, but sometimes we talk about these interventions as if they're their own thing. They fit into a puzzle piece that's bigger, right? And so you'll see here, permanent supportive housing is for our lowest income, the two buckets to the left of the leftmost side of this chart, along with, you can see emergency shelter. There's also rental assistance. That red bar goes across the whole way. But permanent supportive housing goes all the way up there to then it starts to butt into community land trust work, or when it gets a little bit into it's not high income, but it's higher income than the extremely low income, right? Home ownership assistance. And then the further you go, it's more kind of the more average rental market of what folks are experiencing in a community. So these numbers are for Iowa. And then my friends at Shelter House pulled together specific to Johnson County, the same slide. So you can see that in front of you as well. And the numbers, I think specifically the population bucket there, you can see the numbers of households from Johnson County that fit into each of those, which is really nice to see. And with that data piece, I'm going to hand it over to Gabe. And Gabe,
thanks, Amy. Can folks in the room hear me?
Yeah,
Yes.
we totally can.
Welcome.
All right, great. We can go to the next slide, please. So first of all, my name is Gabe Schuster. I'm a senior program manager at CSH on our data and analytics team, which is a small team situated within a slightly bigger national team called Strategy and External Affairs. What that really means is that I get to work all over the country on projects where data plays a particularly important role. And a lot of my portfolio relates to work that we call needs assessments. I head up the national needs assessment work that we do at CSH, so thinking about the extent of supportive housing need nationwide, and then also do a lot of work sort of translating that methodology down to the local level, where we do strategic planning with communities around the need for supportive housing based on local data rather than what is necessarily accessible on the federal or state by state level. And so when we're doing that strategic planning, we talk often about reaching functional zero, or solving homelessness in terms of reaching functional zero. And this really has three main parameters, and we describe that as when the experience of homelessness is brief, rare, and non-recurring. It means that we can preempt homelessness wherever possible. That might be through programs like prevention, but also through more holistic processes like improving housing stability and affordability across the board. Brief in that when a household does fall into homelessness, they're quickly met with the resources they need to retain housing or reattain housing. And non-recurring in that once a homeless household is housed, they stay housed. And one important piece here is that it's an ongoing process. It involves with the community. It's not a one and done, like mission accomplished type of situation. We need to always be addressing the needs in the community to maintain functional zero. You go to the next slide. So our needs assessment work. We broadly are thinking about three main things that feed into our needs assessment. We look at data from different systems, that work with households or individuals with needs consistent with supportive housing. We compare that with a lot of research, both on the national level and local data through community feedback around the rates of need. So for chronically homeless individuals in a community, what share of those individuals do we think have needs consistent with supportive housing, and so on. And then lastly, the sort of final step is thinking about costs. So once we look at that model, we think about everything that's going on in the community. We then also want to do some financial modeling and projections around what it would cost to bring those units to bear, and then also to sustain them in terms of ongoing operating and service costs. So in Johnson County and Iowa City, we're taking the same approach at the local level. We're looking at the need for permanent supportive housing across a number of different sectors, but with data really relying on homeless system data from the Homeless Management Information System, or HMIS, which allows us to look at very detailed data about who is experiencing homelessness and some of the characteristics of those households. But when we look at that data, we really want to ground it in the community experience. So we have been holding a number of sessions with various stakeholders and organizations that deal with things like behavioral health, physical health, the criminal justice system, and so on, to think about what they see in terms of the clients that they interact with, and how that can help us refine our estimates around the need for supportive housing locally. And then there are three primary data types that we think about. So we look at how many people are in those systems. We look at, in this case, really the chronic and non-chronic homeless adult individuals. We also think about homeless family households, and then homeless transition-aged youth who probably have slightly different service needs than adult individuals. And then we look at those rates of need. So what do we think, what share of those populations have needs consistent with supportive housing? That gets combined with data that we have around the inventory locally. So what housing exists today and how it's functioning. Things like utilization rates, turnover time, to see if, before we calculate out a final gap number, is there a capacity to functionally expand the supportive housing provided by the system through things like improving efficiencies at the local level. And then what we're left with after that process is, the gap, what more supportive housing is called for. You can go to the next slide. So on that front, the state of PSH inventory in Johnson County is that it's operating at a really powerful clip. What we see is around 90% utilization by the permanent supportive housing that is administered by Shelter House. And this is pretty much a functional maximum. So people will see that and say, well, there's 10% to be gained there in terms of hitting 100% utilization. We don't really ever see 100% utilization because there is always going to be some downtime in units when a tenant moves out. It can take time to match a new tenant into that unit. There may be need to do repairs or updates to a unit, same as when anyone moves out of their apartment. Nationally, we see that utilization for PSH is a bit lower than what it is in Johnson County. It's around 84% as a national average. The only standout piece to that locally is the Veteran Supportive Housing BASH program in Johnson County operates at about 55% of utilization. But of course, this is a system that is limited in terms of the population it can serve. So they have, I think, is around 90 something units, but they can only serve veterans. So the remainder of those units are, expected to be a bit more underutilized. Next slide. All right. So locally, we've been leveraging 3 years worth of data from HMIS, the Homeless Management Information System. Johnson County is part of the balance of state for Iowa Continuum of Care, so it gets lumped in with a lot of other places. But we've been able to work with HMIS to get Johnson County specific data. So they were able to pull for us data on the populations and households served in emergency shelters, transitional housing, prevention, street outreach, over the past 3 years. And these are unduplicated households. So we make sure that when households, maybe touch a system, they move back out and then experience homelessness again, that we're not double counting those. And what we see there is, not too far off from national standards. About 23% of those households experience chronic homelessness. Nationally and statewide, that is 22%. So just very, very slightly, really insignificantly over what we see as a national average and an average in Iowa more broadly. And it's worth calling out, however, that this is really a lower bound of people who experience homelessness, because this is just the folks who have contact with the system. So, of course, if people aren't enrolled in any of those programs, aren't entered into HMIS, they are missed. Of those households, 1,093 households, 77% were adult-only individual households, 14% family households, 7% were transition-aged youth, and 1% of those were parenting youth. So family households where the head of household is between 18 and 24 years old. So, as I said earlier, we do a lot of stakeholder sessions as part of this process to think about what we see in the data and also to help us refine our estimates around the share of those populations that have needs consistent with supportive housing. So in these sessions, we look at preliminary numbers that are coming out of the model, discuss the total need that we're seeing. We break that out by household type and intervention. We also conduct a number of interviews around how the system functions to determine if there's room for more efficiency, to leverage resources differently, and really think through what are the local challenges and local development paradigms, because ultimately the result of this work isn't just to put out a number and say this is how much supportive housing is needed, but to pair that number with recommendations for how to reach that. So the number itself is really maybe 50%, probably less than the total result of the work. How do we get there, those recommendations that come through a lot of qualitative data, a lot of conversations with the community is a big bulk of this process. So that said, the preliminary findings that we see in the model sits around a need for just about 300 units of supportive housing. The first steps that we take in our modeling are to look at rates of need from our national needs assessment for those same populations, and then do some adjusting based on the community input and feedback that we have. So those tweak the rate of need estimates that we feed into the model. And then we do account for annual unit turnover and potential for any system efficiency improvements. So annual unit turnover, how many units currently do we expect to come online over the course of the year through natural turnover? And then if there is room to serve more folks with the existing inventory, which, as I touched on, we're pretty much operating at maximum capacity. Of those 300 units, we're seeing that about 260 or so would be for individual adult households, and about 40 would be for families.
I had a question about this 261 units and the 36 units for families versus individuals. Is this specific to our community?
Yes, it is.
Okay. And Johnson County totally, not just Iowa City?
That's correct.
All right. Thank you.
And I think with that, I'm going to pass it over to Chrissy.
Thanks, Gabe. So, in part, I just want to predicate the next portion of the conversation with the reality that this is the projected need to right-size permanent supportive housing for Johnson County. This is predicated on the existing capacity that we've been working to maintain, which is 61 bedroom units across 2 different single-site projects and 130 units of housing supportive services through scattered site and using specialized vouchers. We thought that it'd be helpful to look at the costs that have been associated in developing permanent supportive housing in our community and looking specifically at the most recent project that we worked on and opened in 2022, the 501 project. I'm known for utilitarian naming of projects. So the 501 project, it's a three-story building, over 24,000 square feet, new construction project. We broke ground in the spring of 2021. It was placed into service in June of 2022 and fully occupied by the end of August. It was a very aggressive construction timeline. We have our general contractor there to thank for that. The building is built to trauma-informed design specifications, just like Cross Park Place was. It is 36 one-bedroom units, includes offices for program staff, private meeting rooms, clinic area for our embedded primary and behavioral health clinicians from University of Iowa Hospitals and Clinics and the College of Nursing. There's laundry, computer workstations, multi-purpose congregate areas, and very importantly, a hot room for bed bug mitigation. That project, from land all the way through construction completion, in 2022 cost $7.57 million. To source that project, we used multiple funding sources, and you can see that on the right side of the slide. National Housing Trust Fund, which the Iowa Finance Authority administers. It's a conditional loan, so not repayable debt, thankfully. Housing Trust Fund of Johnson County, with the support of everyone in this room. We have both a grant and repayable loans, so we are supporting debt service through that support. And CDBG home grants, private giving, and commercial financing. I'd say going through this experience, I would never advocate for doing commercial financing for a permanent supportive housing project again. We were responding to a great sense of urgency and need to build capacity and create additional permanent supportive housing units. Following our experience with Cross Park Place, we saw the transformative impact that we were having, the life-saving impact that we were having, and we did all that we could to bring these 36 units online as quickly as possible. Thankfully, the East Central region, which of course no longer exists, was very significant in helping us. They played a significant role in helping us to be able to pay off and retire that debt, in addition to quite a number of local private donors. Working with our general contractor on this project, just recently looking at the numbers, I asked what would it cost to build this same project if we were to go forward in 2026. And he estimated if it was the same site, the same land, everything staying the same, $10.2 million for 36 units. So significant increase in our development costs there. An additional component to bringing permanent supportive housing online has been the reality that we fully furnished the units. So we had a budget for 501 of $475,000. That was furniture for all the units, the common spaces, work areas, clinical spaces, the technology in the building, safety requirements, and that was sourced through a grant from the Johnson County, private gifts, and then grants from civic organizations, private foundations, and corporations. The part that we really want to lean into and make sure that we're not missing here is to ensure that folks understand that the significant ongoing costs of permanent supportive housing. So the building is one thing, bringing that building online is one thing, and building it for the intended purpose and to last, but then it gets into the reality of the annual operating and supportive services budgets and how to source that. So for operations, we're looking at single-site permanent supportive housing facilities. Those facilities are staffed 24/7. For Iowa City, that's a code requirement. I think it's still a code requirement. Even if it wasn't, I would require that if we were bringing a building online, it should be staffed 24/7. That's really a protection for our tenants. It has been very important, not something to be missed there. You also need to be looking at property management and facility maintenance. The buildings, the units get a lot of wear and tear, heavy wear and tear. So these are significant expenditures for a permanent supportive housing provider. Supportive services, just generally, the case manager to tenant ratio, best practice is 1 to 12. We maintain that 1 to 12 ratio. We rely on deep partnerships, longstanding partnerships with University of Iowa Hospitals and Clinics Adult Psychiatry and University of Iowa College of Nursing to provide both the behavioral health and primary health care services embedded in our buildings. That's at no cost to our tenants. We're not paying for that. They've been able to figure out how to source and resource that work, and it is a key part of ensuring that we have a high-fidelity program. So when looking at the costs, those annual operating costs, trying to break it out in ways to wrap my head around, I looked at the average per tenant cost at 501. So the average per tenant cost, annual cost, is $23,120. And that's for a project if I remove any debt service out of that. So if we don't include debt service as part of our operating costs, that's at 23,000 point. That pencils out to a little over $830,000 annually for the operating and supportive services budget to support 36 tenants in a 36 one-bedroom unit multifamily building. To source that, we've relied on a combination of different resources. Project-based vouchers. The partnership with the Iowa City Housing Authority has been vital to our community's ability to bring permanent supportive housing online. We would not be able to do this. The fact that they were standing by us from the very beginning of these initiatives and removed local restrictions so that only those federal restrictions applied meant that people who had been homeless for decades now could qualify for that rental support and access housing. So it really has, they are a core partner and stakeholder. Then that in combination with tenant rent. So tenants they are responsible for paying up to 30% of their income. And then the other components, we rely right now on HUD Continuum of Care funding for the supportive services and operating portions of our budget, and private gifts and fundraising to cover the gaps. I will say that going forward, if I had the ability to just draw a dotted line through that HUD Continuum of Care for you right now, I would, or a red X. All indications are that changes in HUD policy and practice will no longer support this work. So that, I'll get to that in a second, but that's a major challenge. But on the good news side of this, and most importantly, is the impact that we've seen in our community from permanent supportive housing. Permanent supportive housing works. It is transformative. It delivers. On the left side, you see the national outcomes, those indications of changes in public systems. So incarceration rates decreasing by 52%, more than 83% remaining housed for at least 1 year, emergency room visits declining by 57%, and emergency detox services declining by 87%. Locally, we do not have all of, at least currently, all of the data analysis methods of being able to collect and update this data consistently. We would love to build that capacity, but what we do have are some data points that we can share with you tonight. And in every way, we are exceeding those national trends. So working with Iowa City Police Department, we were able to analyze the last 2 years, or the 2 years prior to housing for Cross Park Place tenants, their arrest records, compared to the most recent 2 years in housing, and that's a change of 68% decrease. When we first looked at tenants across Park Place after opening in 2019, by 1 year in, when the city had more data analysis capabilities through grant funding, we worked with Iowa City PD at the time, and the change in incarceration rates was a decrease of 73%. So we're holding steady in these areas. And 98.8, almost 99% of our tenants are remaining housed for at least 1 year. Another part of this housing stability metric is the fact that for our single-site projects, out of the 60 units, since January of 2019, we've housed 93 individuals in our single-site projects. Only one person in that entire time has exited to homelessness. So to say that permanent supportive housing delivers is an understatement. It is an intervention that ends homelessness. It has broad public cross-system benefits, and it transforms lives. It saves lives. We do have just a couple of case studies that we could look at on the changes in medical services and hospitalization utilization. These are dated. Again, we'd love the capacity and the data sharing relationships to be able to continuously have this information. You can see on the left-hand side, tenant 1, prior to housing, significant medical costs being incurred, over $200,000. About 1 year into housing, that decreasing to $957. That's a change of 99%. Tenant 2, similar, change of 74%. And specifically, across the two individuals, a 78% decrease in emergency room visits. So whereas these indicators, these metrics have profound implications for our partners, for the different systems, I wish that there was a way to really bring this home for you as to what it makes, the difference it makes in the actual person's life, and the people who we're working with, and their quality of life, and how dramatically it changes over what is a really relatively short period of time. Also say one of the foundations of permanent supportive housing is that engagement is voluntary. Sometimes people want to kind of pick away at that. 100% of our tenants over time, as they build rapport with our staff, with our partners, 100% are engaging in some aspects of ongoing care and service. And it's their choice, which is profoundly different than what they're used to. So the challenges. There's quite a number of challenges. Again, predicating this on, we have 60 units in single site of permanent supportive housing is our current capacity, 130 through scattered site. The reality of the housing market in Johnson County does not really lend itself very well to development through scattered site. We have an inelastic housing market and a high tolerance for vacancy rates. Development timelines, they're timelines. They're not immediate versus the imminent need and the sense of urgency that I know that we're all feeling here in our community. It compels us to consider intermediary interventions, but how to balance those interventions without compromising the long-term goal and solution to ending homelessness. Another reality, we have near-term funding cliffs, COVID response dollars, Home ARP, Home ARP, and SLFRF. Those funds are currently being used to support 105 households. They're receiving supportive services through scattered site, utilizing specialized vouchers. That funding ends by December of 2027. We have imminent changes in HUD priorities and practices. If advanced, that will place 84 formerly chronically homeless individuals at very high risk of losing their housing. We will not have the resources to continue to maintain their housing and support services. So specific timelines, as soon as July of 2026. If these policy changes are enacted, we, as a community, lose $515,000 that is being used to support 60 permanent supportive housing households. And by January of 2027, another $265,000 that is supporting another 24 households. To kind of tie things back to the process that we've been working through and partnering with Corporation for Supportive Housing and our stakeholders community-wide. The needs assessment and the community planning, we're deep into this process. Some of the initial data has been shared with you. So we are now into the community planning, broadening out those conversations that October through December quarter, looking towards the first quarter of 2026 with having some initial documents and materials, recommendations ready to share out with the community, and facilitated conversations to start considering and reviewing what the different investment strategies might be based on the policy interests that all of you have. And that, I think, ties out our presentation, and I'm very happy to take any questions that you have. And I'm sure Amy will, and Gabe as well, be available.
I have just a very localized question. It's the second to last slide where you talk about the challenges. What was the, actually, there we go. Thank you. It was the 2027 amount.
And we can send this out.
That would be fantastic.
I just have a question. When the CSH member was talking about the data shows that 1,093 individuals engaging with our homeless system last year, but the recommendation is to create only 261 for individual and 36 family for Burman supported unit. Can you clarify how the recommendation was calculated? Specifically, how many of the 1,093 people were identified as chronically homeless or likely to need long-term supportive housing versus those who only need short-term support?
Gabe, would you be able to respond to that?
I am happy to. Can folks hear me?
Yes.
Great. So that is correct. 1,093 individual households had contact with the homeless system in 2024. And our estimates right now sit around 300 units of supportive housing need tied to those households. We don't estimate that, every household that experiences homelessness has a need consistent with supportive housing because there are going to be other interventions that work for those households to help them reattain housing that don't necessarily come with the same intensity of services or sort of permanent supports that really define the permanent supportive housing model. So of those, households that we saw, 220 of the 1,093 were chronically homeless individuals. And about 626 were non-chronically homeless individuals. On top, we don't estimate that 100% of chronically homeless individuals have needs consistent with supportive housing either. Right now, the model puts the estimate of need in that population around 90%. And we do also have some estimate around need for non-chronically homeless individuals or households because sometimes the assessment criteria miss, where there might be sort of deeper service needs.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was a wonderful presentation, everybody. I was curious.
Will you get closer to your mic, please?
Sorry about that. I saw that the scatter site, or excuse me, the single site, like 501 and Cross Park Place, et cetera, had a higher success rate. Is there something? Is that like consistent data, or is that just kind of like what we see in Iowa City?
Well, for success in housing stability, scattered site versus
yes.
single site?
Yeah.
We could talk about the local, but.
That's a great question. I will say the success that Shelter House is seeing is phenomenal. And nationally, we do see a high, we usually, Gabe, what would you say? I feel like it's in the late, like 80%, early 90% of folks who stay housed for at least a year across the nation. It's just the data that, and we can send you links to all of this data as well, but the data that we see over and over again just shows, like Chrissy says, it works, it works, it works. People just stay housed.
Is there something to the fact that I know that a great deal of thought went into the design
Yep.
of both of those buildings. I would assume that has some positive impact.
Single site versus scattered site, why is there a national difference in success?
Yeah.
Is the question.
Is that, the question is between single site and scattered site, or
That
with a
was-
trauma-informed design?
Yeah,
that was
I
his
think that's what I was
question.
asking. If there's
Okay.
a national trend of the single site versus scatter site success.
Oh, sure. Gabe, do you have that information handy at all? And we can definitely circle back with you and see what the difference is there with that, for sure.
I will say that locally, our experience has been that when we are in scattered site, individuals, the households have multiple neighbors that are not, they haven't had the same lived experience. They don't have the same invested interest in helping people remain housed. We're working with landlords that do not have the same mission as we do. So these kinds of differences do have an impact over time, and primarily we see non-renewal of leases.
Okay.
Yeah.
Somewhat related to that, what is the, I guess, right proportion or right size of these I'll call them a multifamily unit, but multiple, like the 501 project? I mean,
Sure.
36 is obviously works for what you're doing now, but is it more efficient to have more, or do we run into more problems when the units get larger? Or do you have a sensibility, both what works here and maybe what other communities are doing that works best?
Yep, and I'd invite Amy in a sec. I can respond, and if you want to add anything too. So right now, our experience would definitely be that 24 units is not efficient from a cash position. 36 units gets us much closer as long as we have the project-based vouchers and we're maintaining utilization of the units, occupancy. A higher number of units would probably get us closer to cash flowing, and we'd want to look at, if we cannot count on sources like HUD Continuum of Care, what is the right size from a cash position to be able to cash flow the operations and supportive services? But then at what point do you have too high of a concentration of individuals? And then can you design around that to create space and place for folks that you don't have the impression of too many people? So on a high end, we've worked with partners in Mecklenburg County in North Carolina. They have over 200 units, I think, in one location, and they've figured out how to make that work. When I say that number to my team, they just kind of look at me like, what? But Amy, do you have anything to add?
No, I think what Chrissy really raises is a key piece of this, is that you have to really be mindful of math, of how to make the cash flow work. And so that's a critical piece of it from an operating standpoint to if your building is LIHTC as well. But then the other piece of it is the higher you get, the more folks you have who have high complex needs that are concentrated, that also means you need to have a lot more staff. And so we've seen big projects that have worked really well because they had the staffing to do it well, to do the program to fidelity. I've also seen supportive housing projects that were, say, 50 really high need child welfare involved families, and they did not have the staffing structure, and it wasn't good. And so there were lots of complications with that. So there's cash flow questions that come into play. There's staffing and operations questions that come into play there as well to kind of figure out what that magic number is.
I have a question for you. Since you're working with, PSHs all across the nation, what are some of because we know HUD funding is at risk, and the philosophy behind it is not right, because we're seeing the results, as you all have shown. What are other funding sources that folks are utilizing? Are there any through other federal, outside of HUD or HHSs? I know that our ECR is no longer and not sure what the new funders will do, but are there other opportunities for funding?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I think we are figuring that out in real time, I think, and looking into that deeply at CSH as well, because the reality is those COC funds across the United States, the average percentage of continuum of care funds, what communities use that on is permanent supportive housing, and what they want to do is cap it at 30%, which would just decimate supportive housing across the nation, as you all know. So I will say that we have states who've passed sales tax. That's just targeted, that's state dollars targeted for housing. Or they've created state housing vouchers that are not connected to federal rules. We see some things like that, I think, leaning into Housing Trust Fund. I will say, here in Iowa, and others can speak to this much more eloquently, but with the new change with the behavioral health system, it's really fascinating. I was at the Iowa Housing Conference, and the person who was speaking was like, you know, of all the 2,000 calls we've got since just the start of this in July, the number 3 thing we're asked for is housing. And so my hope is that they really hear that and take it to heart and start realizing that they need to be investing, using Medicaid dollars to help pay for housing, housing navigation, models like that we see across the nation that work. But those are I think those are some of the pieces I've seen states lean into is essentially it's state dollars that have been passed.
The services part, we're very fortunate that the University of Iowa Psychiatry as well as the nursing school is contributing or is a part of the process. So that was great to see. Again, when I think about the services part, I was at your, or at the presentation last year. Mayor Pro Tem and I was there in Des Moines, where CSH shared about HHS and how some of that more providers are needing to partner with HHS to fill in the gap or to provide some of the services components if folks are eligible. Can you speak to that a little bit?
When you say is that the Housing Stabilization Services program?
No, Health and Human Services.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
I'm assuming I have notes, I can find it
Okay.
from there.
I'm not recalling that. Do you want to speak to that real quick?
Yes.
Sorry.
I just say that recently leadership from HHS was in Johnson County, and both really within the most recent Housing Iowa conference and within the meeting that they attended here in Johnson County, and conversations with leadership at Iowa Finance Authority, the message is clear. It's not for HHS to figure out. All sites should be turned to Iowa Finance Authority. They abandoned the Center of Excellence in Behavioral Health and advancing the standards for permanent supportive housing and walked away from permanent supportive housing. So I would say that's the current temperature and intent with a lot of very political ease sandwiching around both sides.
Great, thank you.
I have a question about the vets. You indicated that some of the housing that is specifically for vets is underutilized, and we're looking at a project here coming up that suggested that that's a gap that we need to fill, is the vets who need housing. So is the discrepancy because of staffing capacity, or is it something else?
I don't want to speak for the Housing Authority, but Tracy, keep me honest. If the Housing Authority has worked very aggressively to bring the VA Healthcare Center and the resources that they have, the supportive services part of that, to support the VASH vouchers, the vet-specific vouchers, along. A couple of years ago, we were awarded case management for veterans needing permanent supportive housing, and we were able to significantly increase the utilization rate at that time, working closely with the Housing Authority. But we have time-sensitive limits on how long we can support veterans. That needs to then transfer over to the VA, and I believe that the initiative here to establish units and dedicate those for those VASH voucher holders is to try to bridge that gap and that tension point that we're seeing with our federal partner. Does that?
Thank you.
Go ahead.
I just want to go back to the assessment again. Does the assessment include data on language access and culture barrier faced by immigrants' family when trying to access existing housing or shelter? Because we see many families struggle long-term due to the systemic barriers like language, credit, immigration status that keep them out from both housing and data. I would love to understand that better. Do you assist that?
Gabe, did you hear that question? Is Gabe still with us?
Yep. What I understood, if someone could just reiterate, what I heard was a question around whether or not sort of culturally relevant practices were a limiting factor in access to the supportive housing and system efficiencies.
Yes.
Yes.
Yep, you got it.
Great. It is not something that has cropped up in the conversations we've had thus far. That said, it's something that has cropped up in, pretty much every community that I have worked with. So it is something that I think is really consistently in the recommendations that we put forward, but the particularities of what those recommendations will look like for Iowa City, I think will really be fleshed out in like the next phase of stakeholder conversations that we're going to be having. And I would say that we are really open to any resources around community groups that might, want to participate in those conversations as well, beyond just the providers and sort of system level players that we've been talking to.
Sure.
Yep, and I would just add to that, I think that's where this data is this great jumping off point, where then we add a lot more of the contextual nuance and color to what really needs to happen on the ground, and it's definitely pieces like that.
Sure, of course. Yeah, I just want to highlight that in many cultures, homelessness does not always look like sleeping outside.
Yep.
It looked like families living in overcrowded apartment or rotated between friends and families, or like sleeping in another area that could be like an office where is not typically will be count on the outreach, street outreach and all this. And also even like evaluating them by the current, homelessness system, even when we want to recommend them to supporting housing, whether it's like refugee housing or anything else, many times they are not scoring high because the trauma that they're going through is never been like the people in the U.S. who suffer from that, they have a specific thing that the system built to calculate that. But for the immigrants, they have their own issue, but the system never created with immigrant center. That's why most likely we see them don't score high so they can get the benefit of the refugee housing or the eviction preventions.
Yeah, thank you for raising that. We had a county in Minnesota, Ramsey County, who took some of that into account as far as just trauma history and historical genocide, things like that, to take into account to have the score be higher for folks who do reach that system. Because I totally hear what you're saying. And that's something we can definitely work through and speak to as well.
Sure. Thanks.
Can you please repeat where that was?
Ramsey County, Minnesota, St. Paul. Yep.
I just wanted to return to the financial question earlier. I think we know that, we're pretty much on our own I don't think the state or the federal government is coming to help us.
Right.
And if I was kind of doing the math correctly, at the 36 units and not being 8 million, but now up to 10 million, it's, closer to like 86 million just for newly built construction if we were to try and hit the 300. That's very napkin kind of math, because obviously family versus single family, that kind of thing. But just speaking to like $100 million, I guess, venture, have you thought about like where and how that could look? I mean, we have, the whole county and city representation here in Iowa City. It doesn't really bear out in the data that we're being presented today in terms of, if we're looking across the county, it's obviously beyond just Iowa City, but a lot of our services are here. Have you gotten to that point at all, and what that could look like?
You mean is how to source it, where to place it?
Where to place it, and I think to source it, that's going to be a really big question. But if we were just looking at how are we going to take care of ourselves?
Yeah. Well, if we were to do something, and again, a lot can be done through design and creating space and place. Is this a campus kind of an initiative that we would be looking at least for single adults in combination with some very intensive medical supports? There are some models across the country. Specifically, Denver has a model with a combination of permanent supportive housing units and like medical respite beds in the same building, and the hospitals contribute to that because of the offsetting decrease in expenses that they're able to realize. I think that there's a lot to be discussed as a collaborative, as a community, across stakeholders, and some opportunities for something really innovative. And then even getting into the, so there's the ticket price, which is very substantial for the built, but the ongoing operations and supportive services, different investment strategies that have been employed across the country, pay for success models, social innovation bond, social impact bond, different ways of financing this work that achieves the outcomes that we're looking for.
That's a good segue to a question I was having. Can you go to the case study slides?
Sure.
I think it's easy to say permanent supportive housing is something I think everyone up here is interested in. It's just the how, where, and how do we pay for it questions that are the big questions. And what does it look like? Yeah, that one right there. And thinking about this math here, realizing that there's a really important stakeholder who's a financial beneficiary who's not here.
I think you took the question right out of my mouth. So
Yeah,
go
so
for it.
Can you speak to that about? I mean, our local emergency rooms are sure saving a lot of money. What's their engagement?
So they're not saving money. They're just not spending their resources on these people, right? The emergency room's still open.
Sure.
There's a substantial, profound benefit. And because we've been...
You're being nicer.
Well, we've received that feedback before.
They're not
I want to make sure...
they're no longer writing off 90% of their...
And we do have another data point where unreimbursed medical costs after a year in Cross Park went from $1 million down to 16. That has value. We've not been successful in being able to translate that value into a more robust investment, right? But we're very grateful for the investment that we do have with these champions that are providing these clinical services, and we need to protect that.
Yes.
But UIHC is a key partner. They're a key pull factor for our community that informs the demand and need for this housing intervention that is targeted for individuals with complex health needs. So how to bring them into the conversation and engage and be a part more robustly of the financial solution to sustaining this work, there's a benefit to their overall operations, right? Because these folks that, years ago when we started talking about permanent supportive housing, we were identifying these individuals, these frequent system utilizers. It's a very bad term, but, they were 10% of the population that were requiring 90% of the care and the investment. And when we remove those individuals from these emergency type health care and carceral system responses, what does that do overall for the benefit of the community, let alone the benefit of the individual? I don't know if I'm answering your question, Josh, but...
The conversation that I wanted to hear. started.
Yeah.
But I will say to you, and I was going to say this to the mayor's comment as well, but there is a host of communities that are working with their hospitals. Hospitals are providing flex service funds that service providers can dip into to provide these critical services to keep folks who are high utilizers, folks who are high cost, folks who are uninsured, to keep them housed, keep them stable, keep them going to, their doctor's appointments, keeping them on the behavioral health that they need, right? And so there's definitely multiple models out there and examples we can share with all of you of communities that have done this.
Be helpful. Thank you.
Yep. I want to add as well, our work to investigate, explore data sharing capability and appetites across our community, across sectors. UIHC is very invested and key in that work, and I see that capability if we're able to develop that over the next couple of years, and those partnerships as being very instrumental to building that investment and that partnership more.
Can I hop in on that? Given that the Center for Excellence in Behavioral Sciences has been closed, is that a place where UIHC could help fill that gap in terms of being able to do that type of research and helping sustain those standards and continue that data?
So they haven't been closed. Just the portion of the contract that was supporting permanent supportive housing was ended.
Okay, thank you for the
Walked
correction.
away from.
It was a little too general.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to make
yeah,
sure.
no, I'm glad you did.
I don't know what the role of UIHC could be in supporting that work. It seems like a natural partnership.
Yeah. And then I have one question, actually. One of the pieces that you mentioned about different models is master leasing. And you talked about it a little bit, and it immediately went to my mind as the challenges that could be with that. But I was thinking also about, what if there's larger properties, right, that could be renoed or that are there that could actually create like a campus model or what have you. Is that something that has been in the conversation, number one? And then number two, in terms of thinking about sort of what's the win-win for those types of partnerships, how do you make that attractive to somebody who owns the property? What do they get from this? Do they get a tax write-off? Are they able to? How can we think about these partnerships creatively? Because I do see that it probably is, I would imagine that master leasing, if it's on individual properties, as much as it actually fits with our strategic plan about affordable housing and helpful housing across the spectrum embedded in neighborhoods, the need is so great that it seems also that it would be more cost effective to think of a larger property and be more creative about it. So I just wondered if that's something that has come up. And if you could speak to, just talk about that.
Master leasing in general.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you.
I think it's a really fascinating model because I think what it does is it keeps the thing with supportive housing is that they're not only excellent service providers, they're incredible property managers. And so you're doing this dance of walking with a tenant and being with them in the moment of, okay, you're going through the hardest time of your life, essentially. Yet at the end of the day, you still need to pay your rent, right? And so they're able to marry that really well. And I think what master leasing does is it provides the ability for folks who are very much trauma-informed, relational, come from that aspect to be a property manager in that way. So I know Humility Homes in Davenport, they do a ton of master leasing where they've established relationships with landlords over years in the community to say, we will guarantee and make sure you get your rent every month if you let us be the people that run the show here. And they handle kind of wear and tear and have kind of a working relationship with.
Was that one of the,
landlord.
I'm sorry to interrupt,
Yeah.
was that one of the 7 groups?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yep.
'cause I was
Yep.
at the conference.
Oh,
and I was
wonderful.
like,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I was like, wait, yes,
Yes.
that is very familiar.
And so we can connect you with them. They have a really successful model doing it that way. And so the landlord's happy because they're getting their rent paid. They're not having to deal with a renter at all. Somebody else is doing all of that work, including all of the repair. But the other piece of it that they're doing is they're making sure somebody stays housed that probably would get evicted normally. From a larger building perspective, I don't know the answer to that. Like if I'm thinking like a fourplex, I could see like master leasing working there, but I don't know about a bigger one. I'd have to look into that and get back to you on that, but it's a great idea.
Just thinking,
Yeah.
new construction's so expensive. If
It
there was
is.
something that was already
Yeah.
large enough.
Yep, absolutely. I think that's part of all of this conversation is that we can't build our way to where we need to be, and so it's going to be what are all the different pieces we're bringing to the table on this, and acquisitions part of that.
I was,
I can jump in real quick. Jumping back to Supervisor Fixmer Rise's sort of back of the napkin sort of
Yes.
penciling. So my same apologies if I have these numbers wrong, but just thinking about some of the hardcore dollar and cents kinds of things. For just if I did this correctly, the supportive services part of the permanent supportive housing would, if we hit what our full need, am I correct? That would be probably an annual cost of between $4 and $4.5 million for that part of our shelter. I mean, that's just one part of our local shelter services. But is that what we need to be having in our minds to be thinking about for what that would take? And I know that's real speculative. but
I'm not confident I'm tracking the math, but that could be
just-
right. If you penciled it out, I hadn't.
Yeah, I think it was like 832,000, I think, was what the current.
For
and that's
36,
for-
and then then
if I multiply,
If that's the
I might have
number.
used 60 as my number, so it might be bigger than that. So anyway, but yeah, so we're talking something in that ballpark of a commitment that we would need to make, because if we just have the building without the services, what we heard today, and I think we probably already all knew, is that if you don't have those two things together, then you don't get the success that we want to see and that we have been seeing, correct?
Right. And so then what are the different sources of being able to
And
support
ongoing
that?
and kinds of things. So, yeah, okay, thank you. Just wanted to make sure I
Yeah.
had the picture.
So I was thinking about, master leasing as well. When I think about master leasing, I think about, not to disparage the practice at all, but it basically is just a subsidization of landlords who then make a lot of our money and just for profit, Where I've seen other models kind of like globally, they mix in permanent supportive housing with a broader, robust public housing system or social housing system in Europe, where it's mixed income and the higher end of the scale is still municipally owned, but then it's used to subsidize the lower 30% AMI type of thing. So I know that this would involve more building or buying and managing properties, but I don't know if you're familiar with anybody who's used that model of kind of like a mixed income way of, so instead of the money that gets paid in the rent going to some landlord's like house by a lake or something, it
Right,
goes
right.
to back into the system, back
Yeah.
into the care of the community.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I'm trying to think of co-op models that it's kind of that same idea. I don't know if have you heard of it? Okay.
Yeah.
I can look into that. I mean, I think that European model has come up in different ways. Absolutely. I think I totally agree with you, and I think what I struggle with consistently all the time is that we have federal housing vouchers that go unused across the nation, and it's just money sitting at the table while we have people who can't afford housing. And so I totally hear you. And I'm like, how do we get people into housing? Because not all landlords have the house at the lake. They're the mom and pop shops who have a couple different properties, that they're using as well. But
Yeah.
but I think it's I think it's something we can absolutely look into and have a bigger conversation about for sure.
Yeah, and I was also, I had heard generally that it's a little bit more difficult to convert existing buildings into permanent supportive housing because of, a lot of thought and care goes into the design of the place to be trauma informed, to have the clinics and the hot room for, that type of thing. So I'm wondering if you could speak to that, if you see struggle with that when people try.
So I think it depends on the population that you're going to be serving. I think there are some populations that,
if we had all the money in the world and all the time needed, it'd be incredible to do trauma-informed design every single time. That's what we should be doing, hands down. And we've got hotels that could be converted into housing right now. And so I think we're doing a hotel to housing conversion right now in Dickinson, North Dakota. And we have, in that case, there's just a ton of families that are experiencing homelessness that are ending up in the DV shelter that haven't experienced any of that violence. And so they just need a place to land. And so I think for them, it's working out because they definitely have, I'm sure, experienced trauma of some type or source, but they're not long-term chronically homeless folks who have been experiencing severe mental health or substance use for a long, long time. So I think it depends on your population. I think it also just depends on the resources you have available, too.
Yeah.
But yeah, I totally hear you that I love the trauma-informed design aspect of housing.
Absolutely.
It's incredible.
And while I have you, I was thinking about I think back in the slide where it talks, it was kind of showing like what the next steps are, for these next couple months and the next couple months. So, and I heard y'all saying that the number of units is about 50% of the equation or less than. In terms of these are the amount of units we need, but there's so many more factors other than just building units, and that's it, obviously, and even the wraparound services.
Yep.
So I was wondering what types of things can we expect? What is the scope of the suggestions going to be? Is it going to be as specific as you should build this many units here and this type of unit there? These are the amount of units that should be in each location, or is it just going to be a little bit more general? And also, what can we do right now to prepare ourselves to inevitably make that step?
Yeah, totally. Those are great questions. I don't know, Missy, do you want to speak to that? I mean, we've done this type of work across the nation. And so I've done plans with communities that are like, we want a 30-page plan that includes a legislative agenda. And so we've done that. We've also done more kind of what do you all, like, almost like beginning conversations around how do you all want to set up a system where you're consistently having conversations about how to do this and do it differently. And it's just us helping you set up those conversations and then you run the show? Or do you want us to bring examples and have conversations with you all to say, okay, we're going to have an action about how to get folks with high barriers into housing. We're going to talk about how we set up expungement clinics or whatever, really specific things like how our police are engaging with folks who are living in encampments. Lots of different kinds of actual actions and pieces around that. So I think this next piece of the work is really, we want to say, how do we as a community in Johnson County and Iowa City, I think really it's up to all of you what you want this to be, and what it would mean for you to take whatever comes out of this and actually walk with it and run with it. So I think those are the next pieces. We never want to come into a community and prescribe like, here's what's going to work for all of you. I think it's all of you coming to the table and say, this is what we need, this is what we don't need, this is the system we want set up. Yes, we do want actual recommendations, or no, actually we want you to set up an implementation kind of systems, and we'll figure out those key kind of policy levers and other things we need to pull from there. Is that helpful at all? Okay. Is that right? Okay. What would you add anything? I would just say it evolves, right? It's supposed to be an evolution and an engagement with our stakeholders.
Yeah, that's right.
Just
So
to
I'm-
piggyback on that real quick, I mean, in terms of next steps, what are you envisioning in terms of a timeline? Because I think, obviously you've got us all here now, but I know, and that's kind of what I was wondering if you go back to.
Yeah, we are. So I know this is
quick. But we were thinking it'd be ideal if we could start having those conversations. I know October, November, especially November, December, start getting really, really busy. So we're going to try to get as many conversations on folks' calendars as we can between now and the end of the year, knowing that's going to probably bleed into the beginning of 2026. But then really, we'd love to come back to everyone you talk to and all of you with kind of this draft, if they're draft recommendations, draft kind of structural pieces by the end of March in 2026 to say, hey, did we hear you right? Or what doesn't make sense? What did we get wrong? What are we missing? And then including all of that feedback, that would kind of finalize those recommendations and that plan and some proposed investment strategies that would be being finalized through May and then presented final in June. So that's what we're thinking.
I ask because I know sometimes in planning efforts, there's like, a committee or something that helps, to Councilor Weiland's comment about what can we do to prepare ourselves now.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering if it's worthwhile to put some folks together now with Shelter House and with you all to start kind of sifting through some of this so that come, March or April, June, like we're ready to kind of have something off the ground or something like that.
Yeah.
I mean, and we could figure out who or what that is, if that's other folks from North Liberty and Coralville. And
That's exactly
Can I
my
get on
question.
that? And Chrissy, maybe if this is probably more for you, but has Coralville been involved in this at all, or University Heights? Those are both places that are bus accessible to Iowa City and certainly seem to me that they ought to be involved.
That was my question.
No, they haven't, and we would ask for your help in enlisting their support and engagement. I'm 27 years into this and not successful in.
Yeah, I would just say when the meeting's going to be, and we can try to bring people there. But I, if they're not invited, they won't participate. So we have to invite them.
There's a joint entity meeting coming up, right?
Yeah, on the 20th.
On the
That we
20th,
don't have
and-
an agenda for yet.
And both of those communities have affordable housing on their list, right?
University Heights, I think. is
You're thinking
on,
North Liberty.
I was
Coralville
thinking,
does.
yeah, I said North Liberty.
Oh, he was
Or I
talking
meant
University
to.
Heights.
No, sorry.
It's okay.
somebody's got it on their list.
Somebody's got it on their list.
North
Amen.
Liberty and Coralville.
Yep.
Yeah.
Those are the two I was thinking
Right.
of.
Yes, ma'am.
That is a good point. The joint entities might be a great opportunity to do this.
That's Monday, the 20th, right?
Yeah, it's
October 20th. So it does sound like there's a proposal on the floor right now of a committee. Just wanted to maybe get some thoughts on that a little more, if folks are thinking that that's how we should be moving forward.
Yes.
Yeah, I think also, I wonder what steps forward we could do right now in terms of staff engagement and giving direction and prioritization to our staff to utilize their time to do a lot of this work. I don't know if that's something we need to do. Just trying. Yeah.
What would they do right now?
What would they do?
I mean, I'm just saying in
Yeah.
terms of like what
I think-
action steps would they have right now?
I'm not sure. I mean, they were talking about,
Well, there's vouchers.
beginning to explore
leasing.
some of those answers to the questions that we brought up about, because, they know the ins and outs of our budgets and our expenditures. So some collaboration meeting with CSH, Shelter House, other folks.
There's also a monthly meeting that the county hosts called System of Care, where Chrissy and Aaron and others are usually there, and this topic comes up frequently. Bruce has staff at all
Yeah.
those.
So Systems of Care used to, it was really reconvened to try to figure out a project, and I don't know if, if they've identified, one area that they want to do, but that's how the Guideline Center was created from that meeting. It had a different name back then, but
I thought also like today we are meeting with the county and us there is two paths here. That's what I believe. There is path for long term, figuring out what we're gonna find permanent solution, but also we need to talk about the winter is coming, how like the winter shelter. How can we use that right now? Like we open it early, we continue like not close it after. I think March or something like that, remaining still open, just to help the people on the street right now. So we should talk about that also, as you know. I don't know. It's 5:30.
I do know that the winter shelter was, is there an anticipated date
Yeah.
for that opening? If you can share that with us, please.
So we've offered November 17th. We believe we have the building at that time. We haven't received any information as far as the sources of funding that would be available to add time to the winter season.
So are you referring, because I think our contract that the city has with you all is in December.
November.
Is in December. Our
November.
contract is in December, is that correct? Mm-hmm. Yes.
There is a mechanism to extend it that exists in that
Yes,
contract.
they're doing it early.
But there's also a gap that exists on that project with the existing timeline. Adding more time to it increases that funding gap. And really, we would love an opportunity to have this conversation and make plans and move forward and address concerns about the possibility of, what about further utilizing the winter shelter space. But it really, it may be one of those imminent or emergent necessary things to consider, but there are costs to doing that, very significant costs, that I would hope you would not want to have compromised the long-term potential impacts that we have through a permanent solution.
Yeah, I do. This has been part of a conversation, and you and your team came and spoke at the county, and we did have the breakdown. And I thought that was sent actually to City Council, as there's line items for what the county was willing to pay, and then asking if we could cost share that gap. And I do believe that was communicated. I guess And so has that?
City manager might have some.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, I did get a letter after your meeting, and I believe the response was to share the contract that we have. So we have a service agreement with Shelter House for that winter shelter. We contract for 15 weeks at a specified cost. And then if there's an agreed upon extension of those 15 weeks, so in this case, we're looking at going to 17 or 18 weeks, I think that would be, we would pay a prorated share of our expense. So our commitment is to the winter shelter is kind of flexible. But as Chrissy mentioned, since we're not paying 100% of that cost, while our share increases, it also increases the gap that they need to fill, which would be through other local governments, county, Coralville, North Liberty, or through private donations that would be difficult to raise.
My understanding of the ask was that we had agreed that we would be willing to potentially cover 50% of that gap cost, and we were asking if the city would cover the other 50%.
And we would be covering the 2-week share, unless there's.
Oh, that full 2 weeks.
How many weeks is early?
So we cover 15 weeks at a cost of, I'm going to speak in generalities, of roughly $110,000 of 15 weeks. And our agreement with the shelter house that was passed by council a couple years ago indicates that if there's mutual agreement to extend that to 16, 17, or whatever the duration would be, we would simply take a prorated weekly share and add that to the to our contribution to the 110,000.
So I guess we haven't seen that penciled out, but we would, because it's not what it's sounding like is, first of all, no, which is fine, and that it would be your share, but not covering the actual gap.
I don't know that I hear a no. I hear that the council had already created an agreement that I think it might just behoove, the county to just review and maybe understand before we get into some more dialogue on it.
Thank you.
Yes.
And I think we're covering, so just so I'm going off of memory here now. When you talk about that, what we're covering the city already is, do you recall like what percentage of the actual cost? like per
I don't.
week
I
or
have
whatever?
that information, but not at my fingertips.
I mean, that's,
I have permanent supportive housing in my mind.
Yes.
yeah, no
Yes.
problem. But I mean, it's significant.
Correct.
I think we can circle back to this, but we'll be sure to get that contract over to you all so you can discuss it. And then
That sounds good.
certainly we can have someone come and explain it.
Thank you.
And I think, just to clarify for this council, I think this council's understanding is that the city did want to extend it for 2 weeks for that early open date.
Yes.
As far as our service agreement.
Yes. And of course, that comes with funding, yeah. But
Yeah, and we would fund it.
Already does, yes.
Yeah, it already does.
So it sounds like for the joint entities meeting, we're going to add some permanent supportive housing on there, it sounds like. And we'll have to work out the particulars on how that would look like outside of this meeting. So is there someone from this? What I would say is certainly we'll want to involve maybe one or two city councilors and two of the county supervisors. Do we want to identify those two right now, and then we can move forward
for the
from?
committee.
I'm happy to be one.
This is just to discuss the
Agenda item.
the agenda item for October 20th, just to figure out what will be on there. We don't have time to do that dialogue right now.
Oh, I see what you're saying, just for that.
I'd be
Yes.
happy to.
I'd be happy to.
I would be happy to.
I would be happy to.
Okay. So I'm going to let the county figure out theirs. I think I heard two from us.
Mr. Mayor, I believe the agenda deadline is Friday, so we will want to move quickly.
So we'll get so we can put it on the agenda. It's going to be here at the county, at the city. So we'll put the item on but the particulars will need to be worked out prior to the 20th.
Very
So-
good. We can discuss that tomorrow morning and nail down our assignments.
Okay, so you all can figure out your two, I guess, for the county. For the city, we just, it sounds like anyone else besides Mayor Pro Tem Sala or Councilor Wyline want to be a part of this? All right. Anything else on this agenda item for permanent supportive housing?
So I just want to clarify the next steps so there's no confusion. So we have created a committee to decide what is going to be on the joint entities meeting.
Correct.
And after the joint entities meeting, where we reach out to Coralville, North Liberty, University Heights, then
Potentially that could, because we heard interest for having those other communities apart. The reason we're bringing it to the joint entities meeting. So I would actually invite the shelter house to be a part of that discussion to, make sure that that is the right move to have a commission or a committee created, and as well as CHS, but I'll leave that up to shelter house. I think that would be the best next step while you all are having that discussion.
And in the meantime, our collectives, if we all give, head nods, our collective staff could begin to look at a hypothetical funding strategy in the future, or is that something for after the?
Probably something for after the meeting.
Okay.
I'm assuming.
After the recommendation.
But I like where your head's going.
Don't want to jump the gun.
All right.
I also wanted to say thank you so much for
Yeah.
all of the
Yes,
hard
very
work.
much. Thank
Yeah,
you.
thank you.
And to your team for being here always. For coming.
And I was going to say, too, I love what you're thinking as well. I think, because I love folks who are action, and so I appreciate that. We're going to be having a series of conversations with stakeholders that include government staff, that include nonprofit staff, that include hospital folks, that include law enforcement. And so those will be getting on people's calendars, and information from that will help with that financing piece. But I would love, in past communities we've worked in, we had access to some city staff that was super helpful to be like, hey, does this make sense what we're hearing? Or have you done a housing assessment recently? Can we look at that? Things like that. So we can talk about that more offline as well. But thank
Great.
you.
All right. Well, much gratitude for you all coming and doing this presentation today. Thanks for the individuals that kind of highlighted this to be on our agenda. Thanks to the county supervisors for being here today. And of course, I really appreciate my fellow counselors for their continued support of really our unhoused, because housing, I know that we really do believe it's a human right, and we want to work towards really that solution of no one is unhoused in our community. So thank you all.
I'm glad that's a conversation we're having. We could be having to convince each other that this is a problem.
Yes.
You know, so, we don't have to do that, so I'm very thankful for everybody.
Good point.
Yeah.
Yes. All right. Thank you all for coming. Yes.
Mr. Mayor?
See you guys soon.
Yes.
I know you have a couple pro forma items left on your agenda.
Yes.
I would just ask for the county's purposes, since we're going to utilize your minutes,
Yes.
I would just ask that the clerk indicate in the minutes that the county was dismissed at 5:36 PM.
Great. And we'll ensure that we include all the county member names, the Board of Supervisors names. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Yes.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Yeah. Good. You already brought them up, but I just want to give some thanks. All right, we're going to continue with our agenda. We're going to move on to item number 2, clarification of agenda items. Relatively short agenda. Hearing nothing, we're going to move on to
Very quick.
Absolutely.
This is so silly because I should know this. With clarification of agenda items, is it simply to say you want to pull something out, or is this a place where I can ask a question about an agenda item?
It is a place where you can ask a question, but you have to determine if that question should be saved for that is more of it's not really a question about the item, it's more of a
I have a question
process
that's,
or
no, I have a
process
question that's specifically about the content of an agenda item.
Okay, sure.
So actually with this, what was it? Oh my gosh. In the consent agenda, it is the item dealing with the safe bird
Yes,
community.
yes.
I just wondered, there's one piece in the resolution that talks about, protecting birds, and what does that look like? I know, I have seen and heard from a lot of neighbors about they get upset with cats roaming around, and so is it that we're going to,
So would that
So is
be
this the type
something
of
that
thing where
staff
this
can
comes
come
here?
back, just, you
yeah,
can make
we don't
note?
have to talk now. I
Yeah,
just,
you can just make note that that's a question that you're going to ask, and if staff can prepare
go.
to
All right.
answer that. All right. Any other agenda items? Hearing none, we're going to move on to item number 3, information packet discussion, September 18th. Moving on to September 25th. Moving on to October 2nd. I will just say that we already clarified one agenda item for the joint entities meeting, which will be held here at City Hall, 4:30 on Monday, October 20th. Are there any other items that this council wish to throw out there for consideration?
I do
for
not.
majority?
I think I do.
No.
Yeah. Any other items? Okay, hearing none. We're going to move on to item number 4, which is University of Iowa student government updates, and don't see them present. We're going to move on to item number 5, which is council updates on assigned boards, commissions, and committees.
Economic Development Committee met last week and got a wonderful presentation from Rachel Kilberg-Varley on TIF and how it's been utilized in our community over the past and its benefits. So, of course, that is recorded for anyone to watch. If you have questions about it, we're happy to answer them.
Since you talked about TIF, I do, if we know it'll often backtrack, but joint entities, will there be any benefit to having just talking about loss. Just a brief overview for.
I think that's a good idea.
I think that's a good
Just
idea,
to give
too.
us the ability to talk about it.
Yes.
Yeah.
It could be a key, or it could be a large part of permanent supportive housing too if it passes. So I think that that's pretty germane.
Possible. Yeah, I could have somebody from the Lost Committee just come and give a short presentation on how their campaign is going. I think that would be appropriate, and they'd be the appropriate people to come and
Discuss it.
speak.
Are
And then we
folks-
could obviously comment from there.
Are folks okay with that?
Sure.
As that would be who will invite? Okay, I don't hear any objections, so we'll
Would
go
that
with
be an
that.
invitation to Greater Iowa City to talk about it, since they're doing the campaign? Is that what we're thinking? And then other communities?
I assume that's who you were referring
yeah,
to.
yeah,
Okay.
that's-
Okay,
that's
That's
so
kind of what I
Greater Iowa
envisioned,
City
but I
Inc.
just put a word to it, so.
Appreciate that.
Okay.
Can I say something that was in the IB?
Let us, I know I jumped in on a previous agenda item. Any more updates on boards and commissions, and then we'll go back to item number 3. Hearing no more updates, we're going to go back to item number 3. And are there any of the information packet discussions, either September 18th, September 25th, or October 2nd, that anyone wants to address?
I guess for October 2nd, I just want to highlight, not to address anything, but I want to highlight as of October 25, the waiting list for Section 8 was 2,503, and that include 1,125 Iowa City residents. So still, we need more affordable housing.
Okay. Anything else from item number 3? All right, with that, we have no other items on our agenda. We are adjourned. See you at 6 p.m.